Hello everyone. We'll start the session today's, and then we'll talk about the architecture for the application. The application architecture here, it has two architecture. One is business architecture, which is the application architecture, and then there is a technical architecture. So we just need to understand how does that make difference, and what does that involve with respect to the business and technical architecture. When we talk about business architecture, we talked about the flows. That's a procure to pay, order to cash, record to report. And though I haven't explained you guys record to report business flow, but all these flows basically that are part of the business architecture, because the business architecture is simply to understand how the business aspects are the events that take place inside the application. So that means so if I want to do recording of a transaction, how the flow of the events, I create a journal and then when I post it, so these are the flows within the business. So those are the aspects that are part of the business architecture. That business architecture is purely based on the application inside that and how it has to flow, that it governs that. And Oracle has came up with so many innovative the processes. So it is in their situation, like business architecture covers or that supports the tightly integrated applications. That's like when we talk about AP and purchasing. When we create an invoice in AP, that can be matched to the purchase order that we created in PO. So that is basically, that's what their sense of business architecture means. And the technical architecture, what is the technical architecture that lies under that? That's basically we are talking about that you won't see from the application, what you see from the front end. The technical architecture covers the database and the application tier that is inside the application that's what you are running. So these are the two architectures that we keep it in the mind. So when somebody tells you what is the architecture of the application, it covers the two of these architectures. And when the business architecture means, the business architecture pretty much covers all the business flows. Once we see that application, we can easily understand how these two are distinctly differentiated. And each of these architecture is we can be able to understand. So the business architecture from 11i, which is the previous release of the application, and is different from the current release of the application, because one, it is the more and more innovative products are the new business processes that are coming into the business architecture. So that's the reason the business architecture is always growing. In the similar fashion, you see the HTML forms, the underlying application technology that it is lying. So the technical architecture is also growing. So it's basically from a current release perspective, how does that impact, that we do need to understand that. So this is to just to keep a point of it, but from a understanding perspective, you might need to understand this. So that is basically the architecture. But somebody must have a question, when what is entire architecture? There is a concept called entire architecture in application. That's also, but when we distinctly differentiate here, when we connect it here back. So that's basically, you have a desktop. So I'll show you here. So when I go into, like when I want to access the application, I open a browser and I connect to the application, and it opens a browser with a login application page. To happen that, there has to be something called a Java plugin that has to be available. That Java plugin is making me to this page to pop up. That's how Oracle has created the application, that we will talk a little more in detail. But that is what the desktop. And there is another tier which is called application tier. Application tier and database tier. So this is the desktop that you got connected from, and there is an application tier and there is a database tier. You can ask a question, where can I see the application tier? This is basically the background of the application that you won't see from the front end. There are tools to connect to this particular the back end, which is, if you want to connect to the application tier, there are tools, like you can be able to use the PuTTY or WinSCP or the any other. This is where your application is installed, or like the application operating system is where sitting. And when it is called a database tier, you connect to the database tier using another tool called database connector, such as SQL Plus or SQL Developer, or there are like other than Oracle owned, which is like basically the Toad, and there are so many other connectors that you can be able to use, connect to the database. So these two are not visible to you from the front end, but this is what is basically, when you connect to the application based on the link provided by the administrator, you connect to the application using the desktop. It is not one desktop that you can connect. You can have unlimited number of connections to the application and database from the desktop. So that's how it is called entire architecture. That means if your organization and your number of licenses are equivalent, suppose you have a 10,000 number of employees are working in your organization, and you have 10,000 different licenses, and they all can be able to log in via their desktop at one single time. So that is what is called entire architecture. Understood? Like now, if you have not understood, I'll go back and like try to make you guys more understanding on this part.
I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you.
No problem. And Pramod?
Yes, I'm pretty good.
Okay, excellent. So that is basically the entire architecture, and there are other concepts that we'll go one by one from the concepts perspective. And there is another concept called, okay, let me go to the application and then use the, so when somebody gets application, installs the application, they only get the sysadmin, they won't get anything else. So this is the first application user that they have to get it, and then like you have to based on this particular user, you have to manage your installation or the application further. So this is how, since like this is a vision instance, we might create our own architecture or the structure that I say, and then like we will talk little more, but to introduce the concepts I will go through one by one. Once you log in, there may be some kind of delivered functionality or the responsibilities, but the one thing that you need to understand, we use the system administrator responsibility once you log in with sysadmin, and that is where we create the new users. So the first we create our own user, and before that, like see, I'll tell you one thing here. Once you log into the application, there are like specifics that you need to understand. So what are these? Like this is a file menu, that this is basically helps us to do any kind of activity within this particular application. This is this particular screen here, this the form that is open, it shows navigator, system administrator. This is what is called a navigator. So and then like when you go into, these are the specific tasks that you can be able to perform within the application. So these are called, these are all basically created using another application ability called menu. So when I expand this, like see, there are like, if you see this, like I wanted to minimize and I wanted to extend that or expand that. So that is this plus and minus are basically helping me. Suppose I wanted to do everything expanded. So these are the keys that I can be able to perform, and I want to minimize every menu. So this is what, like these are the functions for the menu that we can be able to perform. And you, from an application perspective, you need to remember the path as an implementer. So you need, when somebody asks you how can you go to a specific responsibility, what are the responsibilities that you can be able to perform, or like if I wanted to create a user, from where I can be able to create user. So these are the like suppose I'll select the operations. So this is how you can query within the application. So in this is what is called a form. This is what is called a user form. And within this, so these are the individual or the transaction lines that we can be able to perform. So in this key here, like these were already created, some objects somewhere, and we are bringing it here as part of that. So when I am trying to do that, whenever I see this kind of icon, this is called list of values. It is called, I suggest, like if you are like pretty new. I would suggest like take notes so that these words are pretty like confusing sometimes. So unless you get used to over a period of time, you will easily get confused. So this is basically list of values. So that if I wanted to, here, if you want to search anything, this percentage is going to help us a lot. You are not sure something, suppose, but I know something called menu is there. So that's how I can be able to search it. Okay, let's clear this and go back. So this is from an application, how to navigate. That perspective, this is what is the application. But let me quickly go back to the spreadsheet, and here the applications that we are going to cover is general ledger, accounts payable, accounts receivable, fixed assets, cash management, and we'll talk about, and we also see scenarios with respect to the taxes, which is called enterprise business taxes. And we also do with respect to the touches also aspects with respect to the subledger accounting. So these are the applications and the concepts that we cover. And since like there is a relation from the accounts payable, we also see how the purchasing also interacts with accounts payable. I will show you minimum setups with respect to that, like to up and running, and so that we can be able to test the entire flow from a procurement perspective. And we also cover the AR also touches the order management. So the minimum setups that we, by doing the order management setups, we can be able to use the receivables also when we want to do order to cash flow. So that I will also cover with respect to that. And the fixed assets, we can be able to use a standalone, also with integration with accounts payable. And the cash management, it depends on the receipts from the accounts receivable and also based on the payments from accounts payable. So we will cover that cash management. Also, we will create a manual statement and we will try to reconcile to the payments in AP and receipts inside accounts receivable. And the taxes, I will take the taxes example, and we are not going to too much advanced in the taxes, but if I tell you the basic, it's pretty easy for you to understand and how to create the taxes. And I'll tell you the concepts around that. And from the subledger accounting perspective, what are the key aspects that you need to understand? If you understand that the subledger accounting perspective, you can be able to troubleshoot the issues with the subledger accounting, and also you can be able to perform the setups with respect to subledger accounting, because we can take a simple example and we can be able to talk through that. So these are the concepts or the applications that we are going to cover. And when we set up this subledger accounting, in GL, there are like other concepts that come into the picture. So we also cover that. The concepts that we get to see is key flexibility. we talk this as a concept, and then we also talk about shared entities. I'm not jumping guns so that you understand very easily what are these concepts, because unless you understand these concepts, it might not help you in a longer run. And for somebody who understands the 11i and wanted to understand the release 12, so these are the new concepts, and there are like underlying architecture with these modules has changed a lot, which is grossly went changes because of the architectural changes. And there are like the concepts with respect to the operating unit have changed, and how best we can be able to utilize that particular aspects has changed. I'll tell you slowly with respect to that, but before that, let me introduce you to a concept called multi-arg. And somebody who is already understands 11i, this multi-arg concept is, I can say, oh, I know this, but no, it is not that way. MOAC. So now the multi-arg, what we talk in 11i has changed, and now it is called MOAC, in the sense like multi-arg access control. It is basically the application side or the database side improvement, but from an application's perspective, if somebody is working on the front end of the application, there is a potential impacts to that. So how best we can be able to utilize that, because the multi-arg is basically the multi-arg that we talked in the 11i, or like if somebody seen an earlier version, the same concept lies that we take in detail. But there is an additional concept attached to that now. It is also giving access control. So there must be some other concepts that came along with multi-arg. What is that access control that adds to that? So that we will talk. There is an entity that we need to create. So okay, let me say. I have already copied something. Let me show you guys the same thing. Maybe it's easy for you guys to understand that way. So I will take this from a simple perspective. There is a concept called a business group. How this business group helps, I'll tell you. You all know that like there is a company called Tata that is managed by a group of companies. So it is called Tata Group. So they are all the legal entities, all the companies. Legal entity means here we talk as a company that is registered as per statutory requirements, that is liable to pay tax, is the legal entity. So all the legal entities are the companies under one single umbrella, that is basically the Tata Group. I can relate that to the business group here. I'm just taking an example. And when it comes to the legal entity, there may be a company like Tata Consultancy Services, Tata Tele, and so on, so many. I just don't want to go and try to put the list here. So to give an example, so these are the legal entities, and there is a Tata Tele in in Africa, that is called South Africa entity. So to complete that example, I will take that. So it's pretty easy. So what is the currency inside India? The TCS operates inside India is having INR currency. And TCS also operates and it has its own entity. It's an incorporated inside US. So it is TCS USA. So the currency to transact or to perform or to do the reporting inside USA, it is US dollar. Tata Tele is based out of India. Again, it will have a currency Indian rupees, which is INR. And Tata Tele inside South Africa, I think it's South African dollar. That like I'll take it as like for now I take it as, but I'm sure like I'm incorrect on that part. Currency, I'll give you exact currency what it is. But so this is how the currencies are. They have to individual entities do transact in those currencies. So what does that ledger means here, and how does it impact? Ledger helps us to set up. I talked about concept called 4 C's. When I talked about 4 C's, so that is where the ledger we talked about. The 4 C's, here we have currency. That is a pillar for setting up ledger. We need to have chart of accounts. That is nothing but COA. In this case, like if they can use a global chart of account, so I am just taking a global one, because I'll tell you why do you need to use a specific chart of account and what are the conditions and what are the countries usually that restrict that usage of global chart of account, and what are the legal requisitions requirements that restrict it within a specific legal geography. So that we talk a little more detailed on that part in the later sessions. But let me chart of accounts and then currency, and there is a calendar. So inside India, what is the calendar that we use? Right now we use, it could potentially go to a different calendar, but we use to do the tax reporting, we use April to March calendar. And in case of USA, we use a calendar. It is again Jan to March. And in case of India, again it is, I'll just copy this one here. In case of South Africa, they use Jan to December. When we go to the calendar concepts, I will tell you what are the various calendars that we have available, and statutory calendars with respect to that. What are the requirements? I will also talk detail in that aspect. And we go to that particular section. To give the concept here, multi-art model. I am trying to put that. If you are not viewing this, let me know. I can increase the size of this one. Okay. You guys can be able to view. Okay. So there is, again, we talked about convention or the accounting method. In this case, I will take the default accounting method. So the ledger, when we talk about, consists of these many concepts. So if I want to do transaction, these are all the concepts from a ledger perspective I do need to have. And I have the entity. So I know what is my business group, and I know how to create the ledger, and I know how to have the legal entity. Okay. Why do I need to have an operating unit here? An operating unit, suppose a TCS. I'll take a simple example of TCS. I'll try to, or else maybe I'll take it Tata Tele as a one simple example there. And why do I need to have an operating unit? Tata Tele operates from Maharashtra, and Tata Tele operates from Tamil Nadu, and Tata Tele operates from Delhi. And so just because I operate from these places, do I need to have an operating unit? It is not necessary. But assume that I don't want somebody from Delhi to understand how much is the Delhi sector or the Delhi telecom sector has generated the revenue, and when I want to compare with Tamil Nadu. And in the similar way, there is a legal reporting that how much is the revenue or the taxes that we have paid from the Delhi telecom sector, and also from Tamil Nadu sector, and then also from Maharashtra sector. Then I have a requirement, and also management also would like to know and understand how much these individual telecom sectors are making money. So in that case, as an organization division that I have created, an operating unit. I will tell you individual concepts one more time. I'm just trying to fit you from an entity perspective. So Tata Tele these many operating units now. And then why do you need operating unit? I will explain you a little more. Within Maharashtra, again, there is an inventory organization. So they store all the equipment related to the telecom. So within Maharashtra, there is Mumbai and also the Pune. Those are the major locations that they have from an inventory standpoint. because they store the required equipment in these two locations. So that is how inventory is stored here. Okay, let me quickly go back to understand what is these entity definitions and how these fit into the entity here, that we will talk little more detail. So now we try to fit into a real life example and how these particular entities fit into. A business group is basically a collection of all the businesses that we can be able to put together. So that is how in application in release 12 we can be able to create multiple business groups. What does the business group in reality will bring? The security or the required functionality. It brings a lot of security from the human resources perspective. Assume if I have created an employee, because employees are stored at the business group level. Because when I use human resources as a module, I create the employees at the business group level. So when I create the employees at the business group level, my HR lies at the business group level. So that means I'll come back to the real life example here. You can say that like my real legal employer is Tata Consultancy Services, how I am related to the business group Tata Group. As an employee, though your legal employer is Tata Consultancy Services, your human resources records are with Tata Group. Assume there is another group called Tata 1. That means like there is another group. So any human resources or the employees that were created under Tata Group cannot be shared with Tata 1. So that is the security that brings the business group. At this point in time, we'll give a quick pause so to you guys to ask the questions. What are the questions that you guys have at this? Because I am sure like I was going very fast in this from the concept perspective, but I want to understand what did you understood and if you have any questions at this point in time.
I'm good.
Okay, good in the sense like you understood or like not understood.
I did understand.
Okay, excellent. That's nice. Okay, so so the business group brings the additional security for storing the employees based on the business group. So if somebody asks you a question where the human resources lie, the human resources or the HRMS is going to lie at the business group level. So that is the functionality of the business group. It's a consolidated businesses in one is the business group that brings. Okay, ledger is a logical concept, so I will leave at this point in time as it is here. Though the ledger lies in between business group and the legal entity, it's a logical architecture. We'll come back to that after explaining the legal entity. Okay, so now we have a business group and we also have the company. The company is in this perspective an incorporation or the registered entity or the limited company. It's basically across the globe, it has its own definition. So from that perspective, legal entity means an entity that has to pay the taxes to the government or to the local authority, and that is registered with that particular local authorities. That is the legal entity definition here. That means a legal entity that can do the transactions on its own is the entity here that we are talking about. The business group, it is not necessary from a legal perspective. It may exist or may not exist as a business group. But from a legal perspective, there has to be a company, there has to be an entity, there has to be an incorporation, there has to be, if it is incorporation in the sense like it can be LLC or PLC or like LTD or so many things that can come into the purview of legal entity. So this is basically the legality of it. So that is what legal entity. The next is operating unit. That is what brings the convenience or the segregation or the additional bifurcation or additional security from the transactional perspective. So if I want to segregate or if I want to separate the transactions that I wanted to see, they like when they go report at the legal entity level, that I wanted to see them separately. One, from the management perspective. Second, I wanted to see or understand the revenue or the cost of those transactions perspective. I can be able to segregate at the operating unit level. This is a very, very, very key concept that you guys need to understand. The operating unit is a very, very key here. So what is that? If I create an additional operating unit that brings to the table is the additional security. The additional security at the transaction level. At the transaction level means if I wanted to create a supplier invoice, that means supplier invoice brings two aspects. One, the expense or the asset related to that particular operating unit, and also the liability that we need to pay to that particular supplier. So that particular division that it is going to bring up. So if I want to understand how much is the supplier liability for a specific operating unit, I can be able to give a quick number, because the operating unit level, my accounts payable, purchasing, my accounts receivable and order management are going to stay at that level. So that is the main reason when I create, so I need to be very careful when I wanted to have an additional operating unit or not, because I wanted to see that entire liability from one single perspective. You should not try to create another operating unit. But at some point in time you wanted to segregate that and you wanted to see the expenses. Suppose you have two different products. One is a telecom product, another one is associated to telecom but it is nothing related with the telecom product. But I wanted to understand how much is my expenses to procure that, and also to understand how much is my sale revenue from a telecom product separately from an associated product to the telecom core. Then I have to create two operating units. that gives me edge when I record the transaction to that level. So that is the benefit of this particular operating unit. That is what I try to explain even in the real life example here. And I took the Tata Tele as a one simple example here. Is basically the telecom sector. In case of India, it's pretty easy, and it's across the globe. It is a similar terminology that is what it is used. Telecom sector, in the sense like here, one single state in India is considered as a sector for their growth, revenue, and measuring the cost perspective, because the contributing aspect to that particular state also makes the revenue growth when they compete with the other telecom companies. So that is the reason they need to understand how much is my growth, how much is my expenses, how much is my revenue in this particular sector. And the similar way in case of Tamil Nadu, in case of Maharashtra. So that's basically, that gives a key measurement for them. So that means if you understand it, an operating unit can give you one single other aspect, that it is when you secure it, the transactions, that it can give an additional reporting ability. So that's where you can be able to create this particular operating unit. But if you see from a legal perspective, or you need not create, but from an Oracle perspective, you might have to have one specific operating unit that still can be able to help you and be sufficient to go on with your setups. But this particular one, if that is a legal entity, you have to show that as a legal entity by creating a separate legal entity. And when we try to set up that, I will explain you that one. And I'll try to continue this example when I try to create inside the Oracle as well. And the inventory organization. What does inventory organization does or help? The inventory organization help us to ship from a specific location, to store the material, and to bring the material into specific place. Suppose we talked about in the procure to pay, we bring or we buy items from suppliers. Where do you store those items, or where do you store those material? You store inside the inventory organization, or in terms it is a warehouse. That's where you store your inventory. And when customer request for shipping the material to his location, from where you ship that is what is your inventory organization. And when you have to understand how much is the value of that particular inventory that I have with me after end of this particular month. So that means if you want to understand the total inventory value, the inventory organization can be able to provide you that. So the inventory organization helps us to understand the value of that inventory, that how much we have. In this case, assume that, like I also told you, if my company is selling the telecom products and a related non-telecom product as well, and I want to understand, one, I can create separate inventory organizations and easily get the value. And there is another concept inside the inventory organization, there is called sub inventory. So that is, even that way can be able to understand the value of the inventory. But the inventory organization can give you the value of the inventory. And inventory organization, if has a specific location assignment. So I will also clear. So it has to have a location requirement attached to the, and what is the operating? So it is a transactional security that it brings. And inventory organization is based on the location. It is based on the legal registration. To create the legal entity. Now we have to come back to the ledger. When do we create the ledger? And what are the aspects that control the ledger? We talked about 4 C's. Currency, chart of account, calendar, and convention, which is nothing but the accounting method. So these control the creation of a ledger. Assume if any one C changes, have to create a new ledger. If any one C changes, a new ledger is required. So how we will see that? So can we, any of these can have same ledger? Yes, possible. This color this with a different color. This and this can be under one single ledger. But it's again like management discretion, that is it okay to have under one single ledger? Because again, if you see this particular architecture, business group, ledger, legal entity, operating unit, inventory organization, all these flow and help us to do the reporting for your external businesses and also for your internal businesses, so that external businesses in the sense like your taxes and other legal requirements to meet. And when we talk about there is somebody who are invested in your entity and who also want to understand the finances of the entity, is also your external party. And your customers and suppliers are also your external parties, because your customers and suppliers are also grow along with you. If you are a sinking organization, they won't come and try to invest in you, because, and you can ask a question, why are they investing in us? They are investing time and effort with us. And apart from that, when they give you the terms, suppose in case of supplier, he provides funds for you in the sense that he gives you credit for the terms based on based on your ability to repay, the terms are negotiated. If you have a good ability and you are a very good organization and you try to do the business and it is a prestige for this particular company, then any entity will come forward and try to do the business with you. In that way, because the suppliers and customers grow along with your business. So that is the main aspect, an external aspect that we do need to understand. The internal customers. The internal customers are your own employees and the management would like to understand the finances. So though there is a ability to group these, the TCS and the Tata Tele, they may not do that. They try to create a separate ledger, but that's a different discussion. But from an understanding perspective, since these C's exactly equal, there is a ability to create one single ledger. So two legal entities, one single ledger, it is possible to create. But from a simple architecture perspective, we will not see that, not to do the complication about it. But we'll talk about it and how that's, and I'll keep this in mind when we talk about, like, when two legal entities are doing business with one single ledger, how it impacts. We'll talk that in a little detailed manner when I come to that particular point. But again, if we go to the next step, that's the C's. That, so can we group these two as well? We cannot group, because the South African dollar and US dollar are two different currencies, because C has changed. One of the C has changed, so you cannot combine those. So in that case, we cannot create a single ledger. So we have to create a separate ledger whenever there is a single C, either currency or chart of account or calendar or convention has changed. Any one C is different. You have to create a new ledger. That is how it works inside Oracle applications. And again, let me repeat one more time. This is basically the multi-org structure. Is the business group, the ledger, legal entity, operating unit, inventory organization. This is the structure that it particular that follows. And there are like a concept with respect to this particular entity multi-org. I'll keep on coming back to this particular multi-org model, because there is one more concept called shared entities. You can keep a note of that particular the term shared entities, and we'll keep on coming back to this particular entity structure, because unless we understand this particular structure in a detailed manner, from tomorrow onwards we go on practicing on the implementation project, we will not be able to understand and how this particular flow works. Okay, so I will try to quickly take you to the general ledger responsibility. Any questions you guys have at this point in time? For time, I am just taking the example already existing one, but we create our own entity and ledger and all the required setups. We might use a very minimal existing setup for your benefit. Yeah. Okay. Let me log in quickly with another user. Tomorrow morning I will try to create all the setups ready so that we can quickly do the required setups. This one just to show you guys how the concept of 3Cs, that is basically, and where are we talking, what are we talking about. Okay, so this is the one primary ledger somebody created, and I'll quickly take you guys to show that. So the currency, chart of account, calendar, and the accounting method are the convention. So these are the 4 C's that we talked about. If you consider rest everything, they are pretty much like not the foundation, but they can be a very key for the ledger. But these 4 C's, that is currency, chart of account, calendar, and the convention, which is nothing but the accounting method, the subledger accounting method, is going to be the key for the architecture of ledger. And we will talk little more detail tomorrow when we start creating the multi-arc structure and the ledger. We'll start with the multi-arc structure and we'll create the ledger. So I will list out all the tasks that we do need to make sure in a step-by-step manner how to create the, if you are start setting up an entity, or if you start an implementation, if someone asked you to create general ledger, what are the right questions that you need to ask the customer when you wanted to do the start set up the application, and what are the concepts that you need to understand before you can ask the customer to, when you want to work with an implementation project. That I make you guys understand more in detail. So at this time, I will say try to digest this particular architecture. If you want me to send this particular sheet for your benefit, I can send you. But understand that you need to thoroughly understand this particular concept. If you do not understand that, it might be very difficult. Tell me, you have any questions?
Marcy, I have a very quick question on the operating unit.
Yes.
So, in this case, if you are mentioning Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, and Delhi, so do you mean like you would be doing the operations, like for example, purchasing? So, Maharashtra will have a different operating unit for purchasing, and Tamil Nadu will have a different, right? That's your.
Yes. So here I said like a telecom sector.
Yeah, inside the telecom sector.
So it's basically that's how the concept of these particular state-wise for the telecom companies in India at least, the state-wide like telecom sectors. That's what we have right now. And in the similar fashion, like if I take an example of GE, there might be similar situations, and AT&T similar way. And so there are aspects here we do need to consider here is Maharashtra is having its own billing, has its own set of customers. Maharashtra would not bill somebody who is in Tamil Nadu because you will not see a customer who has taken a telecom connection in one specific sector and going to a different sector and trying to like do kind of transactions with that particular entity. So if I just concentrate on one single sector as Maharashtra, there will be the billing of the telecom billing for that matter is happening only from Maharashtra to its own regionally located customers, individual customers who are using the telephone connection. And so in that aspect, the order or the service request that comes only from the Maharashtra specific region. If I want to procure any handsets or any kind of the cell tower or any kind of infrastructure, my structure is related or restricted to that particular telecom sector only. Now, just to give an example here, don't take it too much into that one. So, in that cases, in those scenarios, yes, my operating unit has to be restricted to the one specific area. So where I can be able to perform the purchasing and I can also do the order booking and also do the invoicing aspect here. So my transactions from here, both ability to pay and ability to receive are restricted. So my transactional security is required at this point in time because I don't want somebody like see it is similar concept of competition comes into it. Like so telecom sectors within Tamil Nadu and Maharashtra might compete. You have an infrastructure which is worth so and so, but your connections or the revenue that you generate is less. So the competition also makes it's more troublesome. So the regional heads, like a managing director out of Maharashtra and a managing director out of Tamil Nadu or a general manager from Tamil Nadu and Maharashtra are responsible because their performance can only be measured based on that. So many aspects come into the picture.
Yeah, got it. Thank you. it depends upon the business model whether we do at state level or at the country level. I get that now. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's absolutely true.
And also, the other thing you were talking about, not this one, the modules you are going to cover. Are you also taking care of the inventory module? Because I didn't see there.
Yeah, I'm not going to take inventory module in a detail, but how to create an inventory organization and how to add the inventory items, that I will take care. And also I'll try to cover the inventory accounting as well, because like from the cost management perspective, the minor aspect that we do need to understand.
Thank you. And can you also share all the Excel, all the sheets which you till now, so that that would be a good backup for us, because we can easily recollect what we gone through the class. This would really help. Like, you could also share the older files.
Yeah, sure. But like, see, you have videos. The videos are going to be yours. Don't worry about it. So it's pretty easy for you guys. You can always go back to the video and play that. But I sincerely suggest you take notes at every step. If you take notes and if you refer it when we are doing these setups, it's pretty easy to come back to that. And if you are stuck, you can refer back to the notes that you written. I use pen and paper all the time. I that's my way, but you can always like use your own way to document it. But if you are using a computer of yours, and then like you can take screenshots and then like put the notes around that thoroughly. In that way, it helps you a lot in these sessions. Okay. Do you have more questions?
No, sir.
Okay, excellent. And okay, then I'll stop this particular session at this point in time, because it's a good stop at this, and then like we will continue with the application, and we start the setups tomorrow.